Welcome to the Digital Hive podcast, where we talk all things digital marketing. I'm Emma, a marketing strategist and coach for business owners who aren't short on ideas, but want support with the strategy and tactics to get their message out into the world. Today's guest, Megan, is the creative force behind Olive Ridley Studios. Specializing in visual and physical branding, she helps her clients make big waves with their small brands. We chat about the design process, how she nails down the right identity for the brand, and a few ways that business owners can best approach this important investment. I hope this episode gets you thinking about your brand identity differently, and even if you already have one you love, that you reconnect with it in some way today. Hi, Megan. Welcome to the podcast.
Hey, thanks for having me.
So tell us about you and your business.
So I own Olive Ridley Studios, where I help small brands make big waves. And I do that by helping small business owners create a unique visual brand identity that connects to their ideal clients. And then I also help them bring that brand to life in the real world through things like packaging and branded spaces for retail and trade show environments, vehicle wraps, and branded merchandise.
Awesome. So how did you get into design?
So I actually went to school for graphic design. It's not what I thought I was going to do. I actually originally went to school for architecture and interior design. I did 1 year of architecture classes and realized it was not necessarily my calling. It was a lot of work, and I didn't enjoy it enough for the amount of work that was required. But I'm so glad that I did that first year, because we did one project in my first year architecture class that was very similar to a graphic design project. I didn't realize that. I knew literally nothing about graphic design at the time, but a classmate of mine was like, I don't understand why we're doing this project. This feels like a graphic design project to me. And it was a huge light bulb moment for me. I was like, oh, I actually really enjoy this project. And so I immediately changed my major to graphic design. And that was that, honestly. I've been doing it ever since in some form or another. My first job out of school was at a sign shop. And so that's how I got into kind of large format design and vehicle wraps and signage and all of that fun stuff that I do now, all of the tangible design that really I'm building my business on. Really, that came out of that very first job that I got out of school.
Fun. And then did the, more like brand identity situation just evolve from there?
It did. I worked in corporate for a lot of years. And so I got a lot of experience kind of managing brands and designing within brand guidelines, and building kind of sub-brands within those corporate brands. And so once I got out on my own, it really was just kind of an evolution to realize that building brands from the ground up is really kind of what I wanted to do and how I wanted to focus. It took me a little while to get there. When I first started, I didn't think I wanted to do logo design and brand identity. I because I most of my experience was working with brands that already existed. So that's kind of how I started. And then I realized that people need help right from the get-go. And if they don't have a solid foundation to build on, by the time they get to me, there's not much for me to work with. So I had to kind of back up a little bit and realize that I need to build my foundation a little bit in order to help these small business owners build their foundation.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I think a lot of brands who have that like design that evolves over time um, is because they've found a really great designer. But when you can get it from the start, at least like either a redesign or getting that design foundation from like the earlier stages of the business, then it can like evolve in really cool ways that stay authentic to what they really intended. Um, and especially in the instances where they maybe don't find somebody along the way, we've all seen those brands where like something evolves in a way and you're like, wait, what? That doesn't really make sense. Um, but with that in mind, when is the right time to invest? Do you work with a lot of people who are doing rebrands? Like, how does that work for you?
Yeah, I do quite a few rebrands, and or what I call brand expansions. So a lot of times people will start out and they'll maybe hire someone a little less experienced because it's less expensive. And so what they end up with is maybe like a singular logo and nothing to go with it. So they have no fonts or a color palette, and they only have that one version of the logo. They don't have a responsive logo suite. So I've done quite a few kind of brand expansion projects where I take what they have and then build it out into a full brand identity from that singular logo, which usually that involves a little bit of a redesign of the logo as well. Um, but yeah, the right time is really as soon as you can afford it, to be honest. Because rebranding is hard and expensive. It's a lot more expensive to have to go back and change all of your stuff after the fact than if you just get it right from the get-go. Um, and to when you have all of those brand assets right away from the beginning, so when you get that full brand identity built out and you have a color palette and you have fonts that match or that pair well with your logo, um, it makes all of your marketing efforts a lot easier from the get-go as well. So you're not like spinning your wheels with your social media content quite so much because you already know what colors and fonts you should be using. And it just makes some of those decisions a little bit easier because they're no longer decisions you have to make.
Yeah. No, that ease is a real game changer for people because the amount of time spent in it, but then also the inconsistencies where people are like, wait, is this the same? Is this the same thing? Kind of a situation. You know, there's so many instances in business where you don't have your logo on something, but you still want it to feel on brand. And those get watered down very quickly. Um, when you maybe just have one logo and nothing else, because then you tend to like swan around in different colors and different fonts and try different things out. And after a certain amount of time, it becomes you're not just trying things out; you're kind of just spinning your wheels. Um, and it just gets to a point where it's not productive anymore.
Yeah, and actually, color is more recognizable than even your logo. I think it's something like 80% people are 80% more likely to remember your brand color than your brand name. So having that brand specific color palette that you can use consistently is like a huge game changer for recognizability.
Mm. That's so interesting, and how it must be like a subconscious thing that we recognize the color because the name is feeling more like a conscious memory. Um, that's really interesting. What other things have you seen that the brand can do for the business? Have you seen situations where they've evolved something and it's kind of like everything snapped into place?
Yeah, that can definitely happen, and I think it happens for business owners a lot during the brand strategy process, actually, where they come in not really 100% sure of what they should be building, which is totally normal. If you're not a branding expert or a brand strategist, then yeah, you likely don't know what you should be building, and that's fine. But it's fun to see clients' faces light up because there are like those moments of just aha moments throughout the brand strategy process where things start clicking. They're like, oh, okay, like I understand why we're doing this now. Because I had that happen with a client where she came in just being like, I don't really understand this whole branding thing. And I kind of talked her through it and explained, like, it makes you more recognizable because you have all the things we've just been talking about, essentially. Um, it it gives people a reason to like and trust you a little bit faster. You look more professional. I kind of talked through all these things with her. And when she decided to come on as a client, as we were going through the brand strategy process, she literally just lit up and was like, okay, I get this now. And I don't remember what part of the strategy we were at, but occasionally that just happens at different points. And it means a lot to me to just see that they suddenly get it.
Mm.
But that's usually when it happens is during that strategy phase. So we're really getting into a lot of questions and that they probably haven't thought of before that point. I think brand strategy is a very specific thing that until you've done it and gone through it, you don't know what questions to ask.
Yeah. But also with those, I find that you can convey so much more than you maybe thought you could through a brand design. where, you know, there's certain little elements like do you do something completely custom for people, then you can have like handwritten elements brought into it, or is there like a certain part of the process or a certain feeling that people have, you can bring that through in a visual way. And while like on the copy of your website and things like that, you could explain those kind of things, there's just certain parts of your brand design that will either completely show that or at least reinforce that and not conflict with it. Because you don't want to have like a certain visual brand identity and then a completely different, you know, verbal one. So
Right.
having it all accurate also means that you just are like backing yourselves up visually.
Yeah, 100%. And the whole goal really of visual branding is to get across that specific vibe and specific aesthetic. I always say a good litmus test for your brand is to ask your current audience or your current clients to describe your brand in just like 2 or 3 words. And the goal is that your audience, the people who know your brand best, that they would use words, either the same words or words very similar to the words that you yourself would use to describe your brand. Um, and that's really what you're going for is if you want people to think your brand is funky and energetic, then that's the vibe you want to be putting out. You want to make sure that your visuals are matching that vibe. And that's the best thing that your visual brand can really do for you is it helps people understand you in an instant, instead of having to spend time trying to figure out who you are and what you're about.
Yeah, definitely. And with that, it is such a collaborative process. So how, as a designer, do you recommend that people find the designer that is the right fit?
Yeah, it that is tricky, honestly. Always, always, always look at the designer's previous work. If they don't have any examples of their previous work on their website, that's a pretty big red flag, in my opinion. Because you have to be able to see what they've done in the past to know if they're going to be a good fit for you or not. Um, Even if you don't know what kind of brand you're building yet, you should be able to kind of see yourself in their work a little bit, or at least get a sense of the type of professionalism that you would want from the brand that you want to build. Um, So finding someone whose work you like is, I think, the most important. Um, and then making sure, because like you said, it is a collaborative process. So I always do kind of a meet and greet call with clients after they fill out my inquiry form. And part of that is a sales call, but part of that is just to make sure that we're going to get along and work well together, um, because it is a very collaborative project. And if we can't see eye to eye, then it's just going to be bad news for everybody. Um, so if I would always recommend meeting your designer before hiring them if you can, even if it's just virtually, to make sure that you're going to get along well. Um, and yeah, do your research, honestly. Like it's an investment. I would think of finding a brand designer almost like finding a car. Like you have to do your research first. It's going to be a big investment, but it's an investment that will last you years, which is why it's such an investment. This is something that's going to be the face of your company for the next, 5, 10, 15 years. And it does literally affect everything you do from that point on. It affects all of your marketing, and your PR, and literally everything that you put out from your company is going to be affected by the work of this brand designer. So
Mm.
finding the right person is really important. And shouldn't really it shouldn't be a snap decision, but I will also say that you should kind of follow your intuition a little bit. Go with that gut feeling. Like if you get a really good feeling about someone, it's probably right.
Yeah. And some of that can be like for that initial meeting, prepping some questions that you might have. So, like, what do you want to know about their process? What do you want to know about what they deliver to you? For every brand, it's really important that you know how to implement it afterwards. So, like, figuring out is the brand guide like a really important part of the process to them, or is that like an afterthought that where they'll like put something together with for you with some free fonts and like send you on your way? Because the logo suite is kind of where they shine, and so they'll like very quickly wrap up the rest of it and move on. Um, Not every business needs that. Not every business owner needs that. It just depends on who you are and where you're at. Sometimes designers will still hire a design person to do this process for them because they need that like collaboration and, you know, externalization piece of it. But for most business owners, they really need that explanation of how are they going to use these things together? Where do they use the colors together? What kind of fonts would they use, like different hierarchies, and what would they pair together? um, and then knowing that your designer can do things like your car wrap, and knowing that all of those things are going to be with the same person, so that you don't have to like then brief in another person. Um, those different types of things can really lead you to know when you're making that intuitive decision because you've asked the questions, and so therefore you have all of the information rather than just being like, I like that person's vibe, we're going to do great. That's like, we're great, but also like you're not exactly hiring a friend, you're hiring a service provider. So we want to like look at a few of those different things. Because not all can assist with your packaging and not all can help with printing and those kind of
Yes.
things. And some of them
Yeah.
could, but they don't. Like that's just not what their service offering is.
Yeah, and that actually brings up such a good point too. If your brand does exist in the real world, then you need to find a designer who designs for the real world. Because there are a ton of designers who only do branding and web design, and there's nothing wrong with that. But if they only do digital design, then they just don't, they, some of them may know it and just don't use it. But a lot of digital designers just don't know how to properly design for the real world. And that does make a difference when it comes to building your brand as well. Because, maybe you have really big goals and you plan on growing this business and you're eventually going to need to use Pantone colors in your packaging printing. So your brand design is going to have to be designed with that in mind from the beginning, not down the road. Um, you can't print fluorescent colors unless you're willing to spend buku bucks for special inks to print fluorescent colors. So if your brand exists in the real world, you generally want to stay away from those colors. And if you go with someone who only designs digitally, they're not going to know to have that conversation with you about those specific colors, like, hey, we may not be able to reproduce this, or hey, 10 years down the road when you're printing 100,000 boxes at a time, um, these colors aren't going to translate into Pantone colors very well. Um, so keeping things like that in mind are really important when you're looking for a designer as well. Um, and then also think about the legal processes as well. Don't hire a designer if they don't have like a contract for you to sign. You want to make sure you have all those legal pieces in place. And then make sure you know what you're getting from them. Unfortunately, I've had clients come to me who have hired other designers after working with me and then have come to me and said, I'm having trouble getting my design assets from this other designer. Like, what do I do? And I'm like, well, if you don't have a contract in place, there's really nothing you can do other than keep pestering them about it. Um, so keep those kinds of things in mind too, because not everyone has all of their P's and Q's in place. So you want to make sure to ask those kinds of questions too.
Yeah. And some of that will also be just letting them know. Like you might start off as a digital brand, but plan to have a brick and mortar store at some point. So letting them know that that's where you're headed so that you don't then have to change things in the future. Letting them know that you want to do certain packaging in the future. You want to, like you could be a bar, but you've decided that in 5 years you want to launch like a product that is sold in liquor stores. Like that. That could be something that they would never assume. Like you would never assume that most bars want to do that. So that might be like a little bit of a curveball that if they don't know about it, they can't help you with it. Um, so just having that part of the process. And then when it comes to like the design process, can you tell us about how you operate?
Yeah, sure. I do things a little bit differently from a lot of designers. And I I made this change a little over a year ago now. I started involving a live design review as part of my process. Um, so the way it unfolds for me is we have our strategy meeting, how whatever that looks like for the particular project, whether that's doing brand strategy or just having a meeting to go over all the details. Um, I go off and design and do my thing. When I have a proof ready for them, I send it digitally along with a video walkthrough of me explaining my design decisions. I have found that that works a lot better than typing it out. People just, myself included, we don't like to take time to read things anymore. So I just do a quick little video walkthrough, explain my design decisions, and then from there, if we need to make changes, we actually just have a live review day where we get on a call together, we talk through whatever changes they want to make. And depending on the scope of the changes, most of the time I'll just make them right there as we're on the call so we can talk through it and see options. Um, if it's really extensive changes and it's going to take me like a couple of hours, then we'll pause the call so they're not just sitting there staring at me working for 2 hours. Um, so we'll pause the call and then I'll let them know when I'm ready and then we'll come back and review it. And so basically, it shortens the whole review process into one day instead of going back and forth over tens of emails. Um, I have found that it just really makes things quicker, more efficient, and gets the client more involved in the process. Um, I know a lot of designers would not want to work this way because it makes them uncomfortable having someone like sitting there watching as they're working. I got really comfortable with that from my time in the corporate world. I had a boss who was not a designer. She didn't know how to explain her ideas a lot of times or explain her feedback for designs. So a lot of times it ended up with her just sitting behind me as I worked, trying to, say, oh, pointing and using whatever words she could to explain her vision for how she wanted things changed. And I have found that a lot of times is just the easiest with clients as well because they don't have a design background. Sometimes it's hard for them to really put into words what they're trying to say. So we just get on a call, talk through it. And that way, if there are questions about, well, what if we tried this?
Hmm.
We can just try it and see if it works or not. And if it doesn't, we can move on. And that way, that doesn't have to be done back and forth over email as well. Because that, it can turn into a really lengthy process if you're doing that back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. Um,
Mm.
so instead, we just get on a call and do it. And a lot of times, like I had one client, we did that, we were done in like 6 minutes, where it probably would have been 10 emails going back and forth.
Yeah.
So that's my
Yeah.
personal process. It is a little bit different than most designers, but I have found that it just really does the trick for getting clients involved and just getting projects done in a quick, more time efficient manner.
Yeah, totally. And then in real time, you can explain things like if they're talking about making something a little bit different, you can explain if that's going to like look weird in the black and white version or whatever as you go through the process rather than, there being potentially like a day delay between when they contact you and when they read your response. It might not be taking you a day to reply to them, but they might not then read that email for, you know, 12 hours after they get it or something. And so then they've like half forgotten what they asked for and like just all of these things that like sometimes can get, you know, lost in translation as well
Yeah,
as you're going through things. Like you can hear the tone of their voice, like what is the emphasis and all of those kind of things in different ways than an email would
yeah,
convey.
yes, 100%. And
Mm.
it does give them an opportunity to ask more questions as well, where maybe they wouldn't ask if we were just going back and forth over email. But it's one of those like, well, since we're here, let me ask you this.
Yes. Yes. I mean, people have, when you like send an email and there's 5 questions in it and you only get the response to one or two, people actually get
Yes.
conditioned to not even think about it. They only ask one question at a time. Not because you weren't answering them, but like they just get used to only asking one question in an email. And that can also lead to a lot of back and forth that could be a 10-minute conversation very quickly.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so I really like that. I think that's one of the things that has evolved for me as well, working with people, one on one in the coaching calls, is that we can talk about it. So I can tell when there's like a little bit of like strain in their voice when they talk about not wanting to do something. Like then we can dive into the why, because it's not always like I'm just hesitant to do this. It's often like there's a real underlying thing. Um whereas if I read an email that says like I'm procrastinating this, it's not. I don't know. They could be being like a little bit jokey, or they could be very serious in that like I'm putting this off and I want to figure out why. Um so that just helps. Um, and then do you do the one concept method?
I do, yes.
Yeah, can you explain that for people?
Yeah, so a lot of designers, and this is actually something important, I think, to look for as well when you are looking to hire a designer. So I'm glad you brought this up. Um, what a lot of designers do is they'll present like three different concepts and let you pick the one that you like the best. I only present one concept because for a couple of reasons. Number one, in my experience, when you present three concepts and there's one that you don't feel is as strong as the others, or that you as the designer like the least, that's usually the one the client is going to pick. Um, I don't know why that is. That just seems to be how that works. Um, so presenting one option eliminates that, but also it lets me focus my creative energy on finding the best possible solution. And that's really what I like to focus on. So instead of straining my creative energy to come up with three best solutions, I'm coming up with one best solution, which allows it to truly be the best solution that I can possibly come up with for you.
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. And I think too, with when I went through my process with my designer, she did the same thing. And what really helped was that I could see through her process that she was looking at, and how can we convey this piece and this piece and this piece and this piece? Okay, and then how does that pull together? Um, and it's not that like her first idea was what she delivered to me. It's just that throughout the process, you'll eliminate certain features or what have you, um, that would otherwise make it into an alternative concept. And sometimes those alternative concepts don't convey the same thing about a brand because they're missing a couple features, because like there's only so many ways that you can put like all of the same things into different designs. Um, and that is the version that, truly personifies the brand. Whereas people will tend to pick something that is like feels familiar, which is not what we want in a brand identity. Or, is something that like fits a certain style, but they aren't actually their customer. They are the person who is doing it. And also with that, what can your brand convey? It's things that they need to know that you already know about your brand. So some of those things not being conveyed to you don't necessarily matter because you already know those things. But to a new person, want those things to be represented visually so that they understand those in an instant and have those subconscious understandings. So,
Yeah, 100%. And to what you said, I think for me, one of the issues with presenting three concepts and letting the client choose is that they are at the end of the day choosing the one that they like the best. And that's not actually how you design a brand. It's not based on what you like, it's based on what's going to connect best with your customer. So that to me is kind of a big fault in the here are three options, please choose one. Um, and it also comes back to trusting your designer as a professional. I can't think of any other profession where that is expected, where you're expected to be given three different options and you just choose whichever one you want. I can't think of a
yeah, I don't.
single other one.
I mean, could you imagine like going to trial or like creating a will and they're like, what if we did this? And it's like, no,
Right?
these are my wishes. Please put it in the document. Yeah, very important there that we just go with the best option and the most sensical version. Yes. Um, so with that, are there things that people need to know before contacting a brand designer? You go through the strategy process, but are there things that people need to have decided beforehand?
That's a really good question.
I mean, outside of obviously like what is their business?
Right,
Because
yeah.
we
That's
do want that to be firm. We definitely
yes,
want that to be firm because otherwise
that's
your
a
brand might
very
become irrelevant.
yes. That's a very important, and actually I know we're laughing about it, but it's true. If you're not 100% certain about the business you're building, then you're not ready to invest in branding. Um, I would be a perfect example of that. When I started my business, I really didn't have a solid direction. I knew I wanted to do design and I was tired of working for other people, and that was about it. Um, Thankfully, because I'm a designer, I could whip up a logo for myself and not really have to put um, too much time or money or thought into it from the beginning. Most people don't have that luxury. So yeah, if you're still figuring out what your business is, save your money. Um, um, but otherwise, I don't think there's anything you really need to have answered before hiring a brand designer because you're going to go through the brand strategy process with them to figure all of those questions out. Um, so honestly, like starting kind of just starting with an open mind and honestly from like the very beginning is the best. Just kind of start with a clean slate and an open mind.
Yeah, no, I like that. But I also think though, if you were to hire someone who maybe had a cheaper process, was more junior, those kind of things, they may not have the strategy process. Um, so I would be open and honest in your, discovery when you're meeting with designers that you're honest about where you're at, because hopefully they will then also be honest about their process and know that it's not going to be a good fit. Because not every designer is equipped at pulling those things out of you. Um, so maybe that's something that just as part of the hiring process is knowing that whether they are the type of person who's going to help you figure that out or they're not.
Yeah, that's true. And you do have to be willing and ready to build a brand as well. And I know that might sound like kind of a strange thing to say, but there are a lot of people out there who are they're not willing to build a brand. They just want someone to they want to tell someone what they want and they want that person to just design whatever they say
Yes.
they want. Um, and that's fine. It's just you need if that's the kind of designer you're looking for, you need to be aware of that as well.
Mm-hmm.
Um, that's more of like a Fiverr kind of
Yes.
situation. Like you just
Yes.
hire a freelancer for cheap and have them do whatever you want. Um, Whereas if you're actually ready to take direction and build something that connects to your ideal client and not just this is what I want because it's my business, um, then you're ready to hire a brand designer.
Yeah, yeah, I like that. So it's not necessarily what decisions they need to make, it's just knowing where they're at and what they want. Because I know from my brand design process, my business, how I deliver the service has actually changed. And by that I mean like I used to have clients on retainer and I would run their Google ads and things like that. And now I'm working with people on their strategy and coaching in a way that they now manage those types of things, just with the way that I like to work evolved, the way that the world evolved, where people needed to be, certain businesses needed to be front and center with like them being the face of their business. And so that meant that they needed to be the one recording the videos. So, I could help with certain things, but that kind of evolved because my brand was rooted in how I work with people on like a human level, like everything is handcrafted and all of those kind of things. I didn't need to rebrand when I changed my service offering. And so that meant that my brand was really representative of how I work with clients more generally and not based in, you know, something about retainers. I don't even know how you would have that in a design, but it evolved with me. And some of that will have come down to the fact that at the time I was doing those services, but then also offering courses and things like that. And so it was designed in a way that represented like the feeling and the ease that I wanted to bring people, but not necessarily like, some element of a graphic with a chart going up or something. Because that isn't how I work with people. Um, some businesses are based in like we will give you a result, and so therefore that result might want to be in their design. But because that isn't the core of how I operate, that was in the what was in the brand suite stuck.
Yeah, well, you hit on something really important actually, is that it's more about how you make people feel. And that's really, in essence, what you're doing with branding efforts is you're trying to influence the way people feel. You're trying to influence their perception about your brand. So branding really is a very emotional thing. When you're thinking about building a brand, you should be thinking about how you want to make people feel.
Mm. Yeah, which when I named my business was not what was on my mind. What was on my mind was that I needed to do my first logo, which was not great. Um, everything was black and white and harsh edges and very much didn't personify how I wanted anything to feel. But the name worked. And so then when I did the rebranding process, I kept the name. Um, because I had found ways in that time that um I was able to use honey themed words that made people feel certain ways, like with different products, different, course names and things like that. And so the Honeypot Digital piece made sense. Um, some of those things will evolve as well. Um, yeah, but through that process, how can people give feedback? Like, obviously, you have the live review, but like, how can people phrase what they want? Is it just have saying what they mean, like, and then helping you figure it out, like translating
Yeah,
it, like working with someone who can design your non-design, like change your non-design wording into changes?
pretty much, yeah. Sometimes it is more challenging than others. But yeah, a lot of being a designer is interpreting what people mean for sure. And I think that's a skill that most designers develop. I, I don't think that's really, yeah, it's not a unique skill to certain designers. That's definitely just something that comes with experience because we work with lots of people who don't come from a design background or an art background, so they don't necessarily know how to give proper criticism or explain what they mean. And so, yeah, that is definitely just part of the designer's job is interpreting that, which is also, again, one of the reasons why I like having the review calls is because it is easier to talk through it than to email back and forth about it.
Yeah, totally. So I guess that kind of comes back to like if you are thinking something, say it, and then you and your designer will figure out how to figure out what you mean.
Yes.
Um, yeah, yeah. With moving forward after people have done their brand design, we don't want the brand to become like watered down and generic as they go through things and like just use a Canva template and then just change out the fonts and colors. Um, because that's like one or two steps not far enough. How can business owners translate the brand into their future content in those instances where, you know, say a vehicle wrap and things like that, you're gonna work on it for them. But those more in between pieces, how can they understand the brand and pull that through without watering it down?
Yeah, that is a really big challenge in the small business community, honestly, because the business owners themselves are often the ones who are using their brand assets and creating content with them. Um, Honestly, my recommendation, if you're not comfortable using design assets and creating content, like if you're worried about that and your only um quote unquote skill in design is taking that Canva template and just changing the fonts and the colors, I would recommend investing in having some custom templates built for your brand. Um, and that's something that I actually work with another designer to do within my business, because I personally don't enjoy building social media templates. So I bring in someone else to do that who enjoys it more than I do. But that's something that I've done for clients in the past. After we've built out their brand identity, then we built a set of um, Canva templates for them so that they were completely custom to their brand, and it still provided that like ease of use of like, oh, I don't really have to think about this. I've got these templates here. I don't have to change out the fonts and colors because they're already built in my fonts and colors. And they don't look like every fifth post on Instagram.
Yeah, yeah, no, totally. And that system of having something that you can iterate on, but that is for your brand is so worth the investment to me because the amount of time that you save. Umming and ahhing over, is this right? All of these things. Um, and when they are posted, they are that recognizable thing.
Mhm.
Um, how going on a completely different tangent, that something just came to mind, but you know how some businesses will be like, this is getting a bit repetitive. I'm sick of looking at my own brand. For me, I'm always like, yeah, but that actually just means that it's consistent because nobody
Yes.
else is looking at your brand as much as you are.
Yep.
Um, how do you find working with people over time that they like want to change stuff just for the sake of changing stuff?
Yeah, that does happen, unfortunately. And um, unfortunately, I'm not always there to tell them not to do that. Because generally, once I give them all of their assets, then, they're just kind of loose on their own. I don't really have any control over what they do at that point. And I do see that happen from time to time, and I just cry internally about it. If I do, I have like sent a client a note before just being like, hey, I noticed this. You might want to consider doing this instead, because it's more in line with your brand guidelines. So if I see something, I will try to say something in the nicest way possible. But I'm not out here babysitting all these brands either.
No.
And
Fair.
I understand that challenge too, because that's as a designer, that was one of my biggest challenges working in the corporate world is I got so bored working on the same brands day in and day out. Um, so I get it. But like you said earlier, if you're bored with it, that's good. That just means you're being consistent and nobody else is seeing as much of your content as you are. They're not seeing your brand as much as you are. So yeah, if you're getting bored with it, that's a good thing.
Yeah. And I think too, sometimes people will look at the brand and be like, okay, I need to add another character or something. And so often I will challenge people to like look at the format instead. You know, if there's something with, say, a social media graphic and you're tired of the same graphics, like, is it time for some new templates? Is it time for a different format of like reel or something like that? And how you could bring in the same brand elements but into something different. Um, Figuring out maybe what could do with an improvement rather than what can I just change for change sake. Like have that moment with yourself of like, am I just changing something because I'm sick of looking at the same thing? Um, and also like, are you bored of it because you actually just need a break? Do you need a break from your business and a weekend off and like a week to yourself to come back refreshed? Um, because those are those things that can water down the brand over time. Um, there's certain evolutions that we want and certain evolutions that we like. They just don't have the effect that we want them to have.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
I would say too, kind of on that same topic, but slightly different. I've seen a lot of brands make the mistake too when they are like co-branding an event with another business. The brand aesthetics get all sorts of wonky because they don't
Mm-hmm.
really know what to do. And so instead of creating separate graphics for both brands that match the brand aesthetic for each brand, they just create one graphic that doesn't match the aesthetic for either brand. And so that ends up like really watering down the brand because it's just like a completely random graphic that doesn't have anything to do with their brand. It's just a one-off for this specific event. Um, so keep that in mind too, small business owners, if you run events, because that's one that I see quite a bit. Where and I think it's just because they don't know what to do. They're just trying to create one graphic that everyone can use, and sometimes that's just not the best way to go about it.
Yeah, totally. Some brands will visually look good together, and you can have those little elements. But there is a reason why whenever someone does like a sponsored page, everyone's logo is the black and white version. It's because that's what looks like cohesive.
Yep.
Um, but yeah, creating separate graphics for the different businesses to share is a pretty simple solution because initially you might think, oh yeah, but then I have to do this 3 times. But you could end up spending 6 times as long trying to make it all work together. Mm.
Yep. 100%. And I know like you could take the argument, well, but then like the event might seem not cohesive because you have different graphics shared by different businesses. And I can see that argument too. But personally, I would rather not, I would rather water down the event than water down my brand.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Yeah. And I think too sometimes that's also an alternative to just not doing the event at all. Like sometimes people will think of, okay, but who could I collaborate with? Oh, our brands wouldn't look to get great together because visually they're very different. Well, you can just create different graphics for different things.
Hmm.
Um, or bring the two things together. Like what are the common elements and have like a brand for the event is also another option. Um, kind of have like the cohesive thing. Um, And if you're looking for people who to collaborate with, looking at those things of what are the elements that went into your brand, like are those the values and things that are really important, and therefore you want another brand that aligns with those things, whether those things are in their branding or not, but they hold those same values, so
Yeah,
that can help
100%.
pull it together. Mm,
Hmm.
yeah. Well, this has been a great chat, very informative for people. I hope that if anyone who is, thinking about a rebrand or a first brand or anything like that, this has given them a lot of things to think about and hopefully a little bit more confidence as they move into that and knowing that they can figure it out along the way. Very important. So thank you for joining me.
Yeah, thanks again for having me, Emma.
Thank you for joining me for this episode of the Digital Hive podcast. Find Megan and her work at oliveridleystudios.com. If you're enjoying the podcast, I'd truly appreciate it if you could share it with a friend or on Instagram and tag me at Honeypot Digital. To find out more about Honeypot Digital and the marketing strategy and coaching work I do, or to find more marketing resources, head to honeypotdigital.com.